friends, welcome to Acharya 90 FM. Myself Tejaswini. Today in our guest interview we have invited Rahul Srinivasan sir. Rahul sir, welcome to Acharya 90 FM. I warmly welcome you. I think it's the second time you are visiting Acharya 90 FM. Whenever you are coming from US, you make a point to visit Acharya 90 FM and share your thoughts. So let me introduce Rahul sir. He has worked at the United Nations and the World Bank, and he is a senior international development professional. Rahul works cover multiple countries in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. He is here today to give advice to youngsters on how to pick and navigate global careers that require collaboration with friends and colleagues from different cultures and backgrounds. So we will be having fruitful session today. So first of all, Rahul sir, how second time you are coming to Acharya 90 FM? How you missed our radio station in the US?
Thank you, Tejaswini. Firstly, thank you for that generous introduction, and a very warm welcome to all the listeners of this show.
Yeah.
And of course, thank you to Acharya 90 FM for inviting me a second time. I really enjoyed coming on your show last year. It was my first time, and it was lovely to talk about my work across sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. I worked a lot on the COVID-19 response. I work a lot on energy, climate, and health issues.
Yeah.
So it was really nice to talk on that show, and in fact, I had a couple of people who listened to me talking and tuned into the show, and were very pleased with how it was conducted. So kudos to you. And again, I'm very happy to be back. I do follow Acharya 90 FM on Instagram.
Okay.
So I may have not listened or tuned into all your shows. It's difficult to do that from the US. But I have watched actually a couple of YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And then also check what's going on Instagram.
Yeah, you keep a track on what we are doing here in India.
Yes. No, absolutely. So that when I come back, I'm not completely cold.
Yeah.
And have a sense of what's
you
going
are
on.
a part of Acharya family, because I'm whenever Shailesh sir always keeps reminding me, have you spoken with Rahul sir? And always he reminds me, whenever you are there in Chembur, whenever you're back from US, he makes it a point to have a talk with you, have a session with you, have an interview with you. So today we'll focus on our students, because being in academic, being in education system, we are more focusing on students of this college and all around India. So if the students, your work and personal life covers various countries and cultures, so can you tell us what inspired you to work in international development?
Thank you, Tejaswini. No, and of course, I'm very well aware that many students, not only in this college but across Mumbai, will tune into this show. From what I understand, we have around 25,000 people. So I'm really glad to talk about my experience, as well as provide any advice that might be useful to these students.
Yeah.
So Tejaswini, I was, as you know, I was born and raised in Chembur, where Acharya College is located, and I studied in Chembur. While growing up, I was always very interested in current affairs, history, politics, and what's going around the world.
Yeah.
So not only what's going on in India and in our community, but also what are some of the challenges that are being faced at a global level. So this was also always something that I enjoyed. Back then in school, I remember I used to participate in mock United Nations conferences.
Okay.
And even though I did not travel to any country outside India when I was in school, I always had a good sense of what was going on in these countries. So that has, been the case since a young age. So I don't think it was any new interest. But see, once I went to the US, I went to the US when I was 22 years old.
Yeah.
And it opened up my world in many ways. I met classmates, collaborators from various countries and cultures.
Okay.
And it really encouraged me to know more about their countries, the problems that their countries face.
Yeah.
And I soon realized that I wanted to work in developing countries to solve some of the most pressing challenges in various sectors, right? Be it healthcare, be it education, be it energy, be it climate change, which is a huge issue right now.
Global warming.
Global warming, absolutely. So I live in the US, But as you mentioned, I travel extensively to other countries.
I think around 65 countries.
Around that, maybe a little bit more than that.
Acha, okay.
Yeah, exactly right. So when I go to these countries, it gives me a good sense of what the issues are in those countries. And then, as I mentioned in my last episode, I work with governments.
Yeah.
I work with governments, and it's obviously identify what issues they face in some of the sectors that I mentioned, but then also see how we can equip these governments and their populations to solve these challenges. So I think this has really been the reason for me to work in international development. To be associated with organizations such as the United Nations and the World Bank has been an absolute privilege.
Yeah, and how lucky you are. I feel a bit jealous of you. You travel so many countries because it's part of your work, but it's a very nice feeling. You travel all over the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, you were saying something.
No, it is a privilege, but it's also a big responsibility. It is a big responsibility to make sure that you're shaping the lives of youth, women, farmers, healthcare professionals, people who really need that support. So yes, it's a privilege, but also a big responsibility, and it's something that I thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah, now I would like to ask you, what advice will you give it to youngsters looking to study abroad? Means there are some entrance exams, or there are some courses, or there are some classes to how to study and how to take admission to foreign universities. Like you studied from Harvard University, the well-known and established university. So if the students from India wants to go abroad and take admissions to foreign universities, so what is the sequence of taking admission?
So firstly, I would like to tell our listeners that it's not that everyone needs to study abroad. Some people may want to go abroad, no problem. See, our country, India, also has fantastic opportunities, and this has only improved with time.
Yeah.
You have some excellent colleges offering diverse courses. See, back in the day, I'll tell you, when we were growing up, if you did well in your academics, you were asked to become an engineer or a doctor or maybe a lawyer.
Yeah.
Today, that's not the case. Today there's a lot of maturity in today's generation, even the parents, and they are very open to letting their children decide what their career path should be or what their academic path should be. Whether it's political science, whether it's history, whether it's physiotherapy. The world is your oyster, as I always say. So I think there are a lot of opportunities in India as well. And students should definitely not feel that the only option to do well in your career is to go abroad to study. That is not true at all. I once again emphatically mention that India has a lot of good schools, a lot of good programs, and certainly those should be looked at. Now, but of course, there could be other reasons to go abroad. For me, it was essentially to get a different experience. I had spent around 20 years in India, which I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed my time with my friends and family. But I wanted to go abroad so that I could meet people from diverse cultures and countries, have a slightly different experience. So your reasons to go abroad might differ from person to person, and I won't get into that. But if you do decide that you want to go abroad and you want to study there before working or coming back, I think firstly you need to know where you want to go. Right? Today there are a lot of countries abroad that give you good opportunities. There's the US, there's Canada, there's Australia, there's Dubai, there's Singapore, there is France, there's the UK, of course. So there are multiple countries. I think you need to see what you want to do. You don't need to have a crystal clear idea, but the general idea of what you want to do. Do you want to study political science? Do you want to study engineering? Do you want to study mathematics? Do you want to study biotechnology? Or do you want to study medicine? Russia is a country, for instance, where a lot of students go to study medicine. Georgia, another country in Central Asia. So I think first you need to have an idea of what you want to study. Then do a bit of research to understand which countries are best for your program. Right? Which countries have the most scope? There are placements. And then also look at the funding scenario, right? How much you have to spend. In some of these colleges and countries, you might get scholarships, which kind of obviously reduce the financial burden. And in some countries, especially for medicine, right? A lot of Indians, as I mentioned, go to Russia and Georgia. So, obviously there must be an ecosystem environment that is easier in these countries with regards to your fees as well, as compared to some of the other countries where it might be more expensive. So I think you need to do that research Now, a lot of this research can happen on your own. Today everything is at your fingertip.
Yeah.
You go to Google, you research, you look at programs in countries in certain universities, and you make a list.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to study X subject. Country A and country B are good for it, and these are some of the universities which have strong programs in that subject. When I say strong programs, what does that mean? That essentially means you have good professors.
Yeah, the infrastructure
is good, and there are good placements, right? So people are getting good jobs out of these schools. And as I mentioned today, everyone is on social media. You can reach out to people who have studied in these universities to get their feedback. So for instance, if someone wanted to go to Harvard to study a particular program, Harvard alums are all over LinkedIn. They'll be very happy to talk to people, even if you don't know them. If you send a message, there are people who would be happy to talk about their experience and tell them how they found that particular subject. Or if you wanted to go to Stanford, or if you want to go to Oxford in the UK, right? So I think today social media has really made it easier to reach out to people in these schools.
And there are certain institutions in Bombay or in India which provide all the syllabus and how they take the test and all, like TOEFL and all.
Yeah, of course, and I'll get to that. So I think, so before going there, I just wanted to mention how students need to think through studying abroad, right? You need to have a clear sense of where you want to go, and then what you want to study,
which subject,
and do some feedback and understand what the fees is. And then the next step is, once you figure that out, you need to go online to check what is needed to go there. So you have to give certain exams. You might need to write a statement of purpose. You might need to get letters of recommendation. From your professors or from people you've worked with. And then you need to have a CV, a resume. So usually there are 4 or 5 requirements, more or less the same, but of course depends on the program, right? The requirements for an MBA might be very different from the requirements to study medicine. Or to study, or go there for your undergraduate studies, or to study engineering, right? So I've studied engineering in the US as well as public administration, and the requirements are very different. And that's why I say it's very important to know what you want to do, and then go through the requirements. Create a cheat sheet, right? A sheet where you write down these requirements, and then think about how you're going to fulfill these requirements. Now, one of those requirements usually is an entrance exam. Again, entrance exams vary from course to course. I'll just give you an example. If you wanted to do your undergraduate studies in the US, you will need to give something called a SAT, SAT, along with TOEFL. It's a competitive exam. If you wanted to do your MBA, this is not only in the US, but many other countries, including the UK, Europe, you'll have to give your GMAT. Right, and your TOEFL. TOEFL is essentially to showcase and get your English skills tested. So your reading, your writing, your analytical skills. Whereas GMAT and SAT will kind of test both your quantitative and qualitative skills. So they will obviously look at your English, but also your mathematics and your analytical skills. And obviously, there are a lot of classes in Bombay. That will teach you if you don't have a good sense of where to go. Also, there are a lot of consulting classes that will give you deeper advice on what to do. I would say always do your own research first, and then if you think that you're still not understanding what to do, you can always go to some of these consulting classes. But yeah, those are the exams you give. You do well in those exams, and then as I mentioned, you have the other requirements, right? Your letters of recommendation, your statement of purpose, which is an essay, your CV, your resume, and then most importantly, this is very important, especially when you're going to undergrad. They will look at your academics until standard 12. And of course, if you're going
should excel in everything.
you should do well. I mean, I'm not saying you need to be the best, but you should show a good track record of academics. It is important when you go to these schools. Even when you're going for your MBA, see, they look at various parts of your profile, but they will also see how well the student has fared, and if he or she has not fared well, then what are the reasons for that? So they look at applications in a holistic context, but your academics are important. They will differentiate you from others who may not have the same. Because see, ultimately, when you're going to any school or college, they want to know, will this person, of course, be a good student? And of course, they want that person to then do well in the practical world. It's not only about academics. You need to be able to apply that to the practical world, but they need to see what the track record has been. So those are some considerations in terms of what youngsters should consider, how they should think through this.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'll mention there are a lot of good options in India too.
Yeah.
But if you want to go abroad, a lot of countries, a lot of options. See, this has evolved with time. It's much more evolved than when I was studying or I was considering college. So that has to be viewed in context.
Okay. Just I want to ask you, you have studied electrical engineering from VZTI,
Yeah.
and I know maybe some few years back. So how is the condition different now? How is the condition today taking admission, the process of admission, which will be quite different from those years and now?
Yeah.
So could you differentiate that and put more light on
For
that?
for VJT?
Not only for VZTI, anything.
Else, yeah. I mean, if this was covered in my interview last year, right? That I did my undergraduate studies in VJTI in Mumbai from Matunga.
But after pandemic, there must be
things
some
have changed.
different-
Yes, no, you're right. You're right. See, it has been a while, and as I mentioned, a lot has changed and evolved. But some of the basics that I mentioned are very much intact. Strong academics, letters of recommendation, a statement of purpose. What is a statement of purpose? It's essentially an essay telling why a particular student wants to pursue a particular subject in a particular school. This will never go out of fashion. It will never change even after a few years, because that's how schools evaluate.
That's the basic,
Yeah, so I think these basics remain the same. See, some things might have changed, and you make a good point. There are some schools, for instance, in a post-pandemic world who no longer need the GMAT or SAT. I don't want to make a blanket statement, but these are some schools across the world, and that is why the students need to research. What are the requirements? So, for instance, I want to go to school X in country Y, and I see that SAT is not a requirement, then I need not give it. But still, it is good to give these competitive exams because I might be targeting 5 to 6 schools. So even if it's not required in 3 schools, but is required in the other 3 schools, then you're covered. Right? Because no one applies just to one school, because we don't know if we'll get into that school. So I think certain things have changed. You're right. The hybrid mode of studying has kind of evolved too, has come into the workforce too. Sometimes there's more education to correspondence. So I would say definitely the pandemic and time itself has changed many things, but the basics are still quite the same. And it's really up to the youngsters today to see what the current requirements are, and then speak to people like me and others who have gone through this path, so that they're not reinventing the wheel unnecessarily.
Definitely, we'll continue our discussion. We'll take a short break here. So we are listening to a new program with Rahul Srinivasan sir, and he has come all the way from US to share his thoughts. So we'll take a short break and join you again. Keep listening Acharya 90 FM, your own radio.
Acharya 90 FM, 90 FM.
After the short break, you're listening to Acharya 90 FM. In our guest interview today, we have invited Rahul Srinivasan sir, a senior international development professional, and he has worked at United Nations and World Bank. So, sir, my question could be, what are some of the qualities and skills that are most useful to work in international environment?
It's a great question, Tejaswini. See, there's no silver bullet to this. There's no fixed answer, but I will talk obviously based on my experiences. See, when you're working in an international environment, you're working with people from multiple countries, from different backgrounds. For instance, you could be working with people from more than 60 countries. Right? They speak different languages. Of course, there's a common language. English is usually the common language.
But the accent is different.
Yeah, the accent is different. Some of them are not very strong in English. Some of them are very strong in English. You may be on either end of the spectrum. They also come from different backgrounds, right? For instance, some of them have essentially risen from poverty and have done really well in their lives, whereas some of them come from very influential families. But what usually binds everyone together, why we work towards international development, is our passion to serve underprivileged people and communities. So I think when you want to work in international development, that is the first quality or the first trait that is needed. You need to be passionate about serving underprivileged communities and people. Because remember, we are working in developing countries, and some places that we visit are not necessarily the easiest within reach. It takes time. The infrastructure may not be the best, and you're really you're going there because you believe that your interventions can make a difference
Okay.
in the lives of people. So I think that is very important. You need to care about people, and this obviously starts, even when you're young, right? So it's not like you need to, you don't do things before you work.
Yeah.
Even when you're in India or in Mumbai, we have so many people around us who are not privileged. We see them on the roads. We see them at railway stations.
You say they're everywhere.
There's so much poverty. I think
Yeah.
if we can all be a little sensitive to their needs, help them in whatever way possible. Whatever it is, there are multiple ways to help, and I think that's where it starts.
Yeah.
And then you kind of take that to another level. So I think that's the first trait. The second trait is, I think you need to have a very open mind because of what I mentioned, right? When you're working with people from multiple backgrounds and countries, we've all grown up in different circumstances, so we
Yeah.
don't necessarily have the same worldview. So if someone says something, you need to understand where they're coming from. Keep a bit of an open mind, not get offended easily.
Yeah.
Always give the benefit of the doubt and clarify. Try to make relationships work. Be constructive in your thought process.
Yeah.
If you start getting offended for small things, it could lead to a toxic work culture. So I think you need to be very tolerant and open-minded. So I would say that is the second key quality.
Yeah.
And I think the third one is really your communication skills, right? Very important, not only in international development, but I guess in any context. Of course, we know that you need to be strong in your content. Whatever you're doing, you need to know
Yeah.
what you're delivering. And I think I don't need to speak more about that. But I think the way you communicate, people observe, the work environment especially, how kind you are, how supportive you are of your colleagues. People want to work with you when they realize that this person can be trusted.
Yeah.
Is empathetic towards their colleagues, wants to support them, encourage them, views success as not a selfish issue, but something that the team shares.
Yeah.
So I think that's another quality. So I would say those are the three qualities that I think are very helpful in an international development space. And of course, some of these qualities are useful for other career and jobs too.
Yeah. We spoke about getting academics, getting entrance, passing through the entrance and taking admission to foreign countries' universities. So after passing out, taking a doctorate or engineering degree or any other academic qualification, how can we get the placements in other countries? And after placement, what about the citizenship over there?
Oh.
How to offer citizenship?
See, again, this this varies from country to country. I'll talk about
Yeah.
the US because
Okay,
that's where
yeah.
I've lived the most. I've had very brief stints in Europe and the Middle East, but most of my time has been spent in the US.
Yeah.
See, I think maybe I can divide this into two parts. If you have studied in India
Yeah.
and want a job in the US,
Okay.
it's a little bit more difficult, right? Because you're going to a new country. There are a lot of IT people
Yeah.
who get transferred to the US
Yeah.
after studying and working in India. So people who work with Infosys, Cognizant, Wipro, they are placed there directly, but
Okay.
not immediately. I assume they work in India for a bit, and then
Yeah.
when the time is right,
TCS also.
yeah, and TCS too, of course, and their clients are in the US or wherever in the world, they get transferred. So that's one way, but not immediately after you study, because
Pass out,
obviously,
yeah.
because you need to work
Some
obviously
experience.
in India, and then there's a chance. A lot of people who go across the world
Yeah.
after having studied in India. I think from other professions, outside the IT field, it's usually tougher to directly work abroad after studying here.
Okay.
Not impossible. Like for instance, I've had friends in investment banking or in corporate banking who've done it. So again, they work in the Indian context or in India for a bit, and then they might join a multinational company in India.
Okay.
So it could be a Deutsche Bank, for
Yeah.
instance, and then they could get transferred.
Ah.
Right, they could get transferred to a Dubai, a Singapore, a London, or even the US. So that also happens, but again, after you have spent some years in India,
Yeah.
which is quite obvious. So IT and corporate banking and investment banking are areas where I've seen this happen. Even in management consulting, when you work with the likes of a McKinsey or a BCG or Bain and Company, it's possible after working here for a few years. So it's not that you have to study abroad,
Yeah.
but you also have to remember that you will not immediately go abroad after studying here. Very, very unlikely. You will work for a bit,
Yeah.
and then be transferred, and it's true for some professions. And again, these are professions where you have clients in the US, or these are multinational organizations where this is possible. Otherwise, let's say, especially if you're in an engineering role,
Yeah.
where it's lesser likely, unless again you're with an international organization or a multinational organization that takes you later. You obviously then study abroad. You usually study in the country where you want to work.
Yeah.
Right. So if I wanted to work in the UK, I should study in the UK. It doesn't make sense to study in the US or Canada or Australia and then work in the UK. You usually go to the country where you want to work because once you study there, it becomes easier to get recruited. Because quite obviously, I would recruit someone who understands the country's culture better.
Tradition,
And the way things work, right? So placements, look, no one can guarantee 100% placements, and many of these countries, including the US, placements are slightly different from how they work in India. So in India, companies come and interview you on campus during recruitment week. In the US, companies come, but they may not interview you on the spot. You network with them, you share your CV, you stay in touch, and then as and when openings arise, you might be interviewed. So it's a different process, but I wouldn't harp much on that because you will critically learn about this when you're there. So placements are not 100. No one can guarantee 100% placements anywhere. But of course, once you study there, you learn the tricks of the trade, and you kind of make yourself competitive. Now, in terms of citizenship and permanent residency, that's another step. And again, many people, I know a lot of people, who work there for a few years and then they return to India or go back to their home country. They're not so worried about permanent residency and citizenship. Because for some people, it's an experience, right? You go there for a few years, 5, 6 years, 10 years, and then come back. But people who want to eke out a career or, eke out a career as well as stay there for the long term, become citizens. At least in the US, it depends on what you do. If you're a doctorate student and you first apply for a job, you'd usually be on a visa called H-1B. This is true for people across the board. Everyone gets something called an H-1B visa, and then there are a few variations of that. But work visas are usually H-1B visas. And then after you get your H-1B visas, companies or organizations need to apply for your green card, which is your permanent residency. These come in 3 to 4 categories. If you're a doctorate, you get it faster. If you're just a master's student, you take a little longer. And if you're an undergraduate student, then it, I guess, takes even longer. But for Indians and people from other populous countries that are in the US, it takes longer because the green card process is country quota based, meaning they can only give X number of green cards every year from a certain country, and there are so many Indians there. So once you apply, so someone from India will automatically take longer than someone from Kuwait. I'm just giving an example. So I think the green card process takes time, but of course, once you're in a job, then your organization will usually apply for you. There are a lot of variations. People apply for their green card on their own as well. There are various ways to think about this, but I wouldn't bore my listeners about this because I'm assuming you're all in India right now. This takes time. I think the first step is you essentially go and study there, enjoy that experience more importantly, and then once you join the workforce, you will have plenty of people to advise you on permanent residency and green card. So I just touched the tip of the iceberg, but I don't think this is the relevant platform or the right time to talk more about it. It doesn't really make sense at this point.
There are certain circumstances wherein, suppose for an example, we take a war. Like we faced Germany, the students were stuck up in Germany. So in that circumstances, the parents are worried, the students are worried, the entire embassy, everything. It becomes a critical situation. In that period of time, what exactly a student should do?
And of course, when a child is abroad, parents are naturally worried. See, firstly, the first thing I would advise you to do is, students should do is you pick a university that is recognized. See, many times we've seen in the US, students come to universities that are not recognized. Some of them are not even legitimate universities. They just want to leave India and go there. And then they get stuck. Some of these universities have essentially shut down. So you don't want to go to universities that are not recognized and not acknowledged. So that is step one, very important. Because I think our country is beautiful, as I mentioned. There's so many opportunities here. You don't want to leave our country to go behind something which is not legitimate, not acknowledged. Because when trouble hits you, you are in a worse situation.
Yeah.
Then what do? You've spent 2 years or 1 year. You've spent money. You don't get that degree, and then you're just stuck there.
Yeah.
Instead, you could have developed your credentials in India. So I think the first step is you please choose a university understanding
Authentic.
where you're going. Secondly, see, once if you get stuck there for whatever reason, right? It could be anything.
Yeah.
You've seen the Ukraine. There was a war there.
Yeah.
Students have been stuck. It could be a cyclone. It could be a weather issue.
Yeah.
I think firstly, it's always good to be to have the contact of the Indian embassy, and Indian embassies are in most countries, or it is regions, and they have
Track of your.
they have email address. They have the email address.
Okay.
So usually, it's good to register yourself. And I must say, the Indian embassy in the US, for instance, is excellent, and in many other countries too. They're always receptive of the needs of students as well as professionals. We've seen this in many countries where Indian students have been evacuated.
Yeah.
The Indian embassies in those countries, the Indian government has done a fantastic job, and
Yeah.
they deserve a lot of credit for taking care of us. Ultimately, we we depend on them during crisis. So I would
Yeah.
say that you choose the right university, have the right register yourself at the embassy, whatever the process is, have their email address and phone numbers which you get from the website, and be in touch. And then
Yeah.
beyond a certain point, when calamity strikes, you have to be alert, you have to be optimistic,
Yeah.
and things work out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we're coming in to an end of this discussion. Last question could be how you're often coming to India, going back again. You're staying connected with India since your parents are there, your family is here.
Yeah.
So how other students, how do we get connected with India, and what we should do for India's citizens? I think last interview also you mentioned about this.
Yeah.
It's a social responsibility.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. No, thank you for asking me this question again, because I think it's a very important and personal question for me. See, ultimately, once we go abroad, even if some people get citizenship of those
Yeah.
other countries, you are Indian at heart. I think you have a social responsibility towards your country, no doubt about that. I'll tell you what I do to stay connected and relevant, and I hope that could be an inspiration for
Yeah.
people, students who will eventually go to, different countries. I think firstly, I've always made it a point to mentor youngsters in my community, in my school, in my undergraduate
Yeah.
school. So through different contacts, I'm always contacted by people in Mumbai and beyond. Recently someone from UP, for instance, where they want to learn about what I have done in my career, how they can do something similar,
That's
or just get general guidance on what to do in their lives. I think it's a great way for me to give back to my country, to my society, where I try to inspire them through my journey and give them advice based on my experience.
Yeah.
So that is one great way to help and stay relevant, because through them I'm also learning about the changing
scenario.
it's just a changing the landscape in India, right?
Okay.
Educational career landscape. So it actually helps me too. I'm helping them, but I'm also learning a lot. So I think that is one
So
way.
you're organizing some seminars or
Sometimes
some
one-to-one
lectures.
sessions. Yeah, I
Okay.
one-to-one
Oh.
sessions as well. Lectures too, one-to-one sessions as well. I think it's a good way to stay connected. I was recently in Uttar Pradesh at a school
Okay.
where I delivered a lecture to various girl students, and then I was in Pune recently
Okay.
at another school,
Okay.
and that was my second point. You try to find NGOs and other organizations doing good work. Could be doing good work in any cause, right?
Yeah.
Could be healthcare, could be education, as I said, could be climate change, could be could be anything. Could be welfare of elderly people. There's so many causes. Try to find an NGO here and devote some time to it, right?
Okay.
Whether it's through financial support, there are a lot of charity organizations you can give some money, or when you visit India, visit these NGOs and see how you can help. Sometimes just a pure visit can also be very helpful, because you're coming from abroad, you have a different perspective that can only benefit these NGOs. So that's the second way of helping. One is mentoring Indian students to help them realize their life goals, and this could be anything, right? This doesn't need to only be goals abroad, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
These could be very good goals in India too. But you bring in a fresh perspective as someone who has lived abroad and studied in India too. So mentoring someone is I think a great way to give back. Contributing to NGOs through whatever means, doesn't need to be financial. Could just be through, some voluntary work. I think is another way to give back to our
Society,
communities in India. And I would say beyond that, the third thing, which I think is also very important, be good ambassadors of our country wherever you are.
Oh.
This is very important, whether you're in the US, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in Dubai, Singapore. People observe how other people behave, so don't put our country down by behaving badly or speaking badly about our country. A lot of people do this. For some reason, when they go abroad, they don't understand that they are everyone is an ambassador of our country. It's not just the politicians, it's not just the embassy people. We are all ambassadors of our country. I think it's our responsibility to represent them well, behave well. I'm not saying don't talk about the challenges facing our country. Every country has challenges. You can talk about that. But I think everything needs to be addressed in a constructive way and not in a negative way. So I think be good ambassadors of your country, behave well. Ultimately you want people in these other countries to say that, okay, Indians are kind, Indians are helpful, Indians are good people, and we really enjoy living and working with them. So I think that is another responsibility that we have as expats.
Yeah, but one more point I would like to add on this. There are some people who are coming from business background. They want to start up their business. We focused on job-oriented career guidance. But if anyone wants to start up a business over there, like creation of a wine or some other products, so butter or some other products. So if they want to start up their business abroad, what is the process starting a startup?
Yeah. See, I'm not an expert in this, but again, I have friends who have done it. If you've studied in abroad, again, easier, right? Because you understand the ecosystem. You have to apply for a business visa. So there are different types of visas. So when you're trying to do business, there's a certain type of visa in these countries. When you've already studied there, you will know it. But if you're looking at someone who has studied in India and is wanting to directly go abroad, see, first thing is, and this would be obvious to the business person, you need to understand the market in that country. You need to talk to people in that country who have worked in that business to see what sort of value addition you bring to the table and what sort of investments would be needed. Where should they be in the country, what sort of visa is needed. So my best advice to them would be to try to find similar businessmen or people in similar businesses who are thriving in the US, who are working in the US, and understand from them how they should proceed with visa, understanding the markets, understanding the value that they add. So I think that would be a better way to approach that sort of an ambition.
Okay. Thank you so much for your discussion, and thank you so much for your fruitful talk over here and guiding our students, and thank you so much for joining us on Acharya 90 FM.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invite. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and be on this show. And I hope our listeners have enjoyed whatever I had to share. Thank you. And wishing everyone a happy 2024.
Happy New Year, And I invite you on this note only, you come back again. Whenever you come down to India, you do visit, you stay in Chembur only, so do visit Acharya 90 FM.
Thank you.
So friends, today we had in guest interview, we had Rahul Srinivasan, a senior international development professional for us. Guidance to students on career guidance for students, how to study abroad and how to clear the exams, entrance exams, and how to get a job abroad. So we will be coming up with the next guest in the next case interview. Till then, myself Tejaswini taking your leave. Thank you for today. Thank you.